Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host, and today we are joined with Mercedes Austin from Mercury Mosaics. Welcome, Mercedes.
Thanks for having me here. How exciting.
I am very excited. So it was really fun. Yesterday I got to do a tour of your studio, and I now kind of want to do this before I bring on every guest because I had like an hour tour, an amazing facility, and we'll get into it in a little bit. I just want to hear about everything all at once. But I thought it'd be really funny to talk about how we first met because you're kind of a big deal and I had no idea who you were. And so I kept going around after I met you like, oh, do you know about this place in Northeast Minneapolis called Mercury Mosaics? And like, yeah, we've known about her for years, like forever. Like, where have you been in a dark cave? And it's like literally, I must have told about 7 or 8 designers and they're like, yeah, we know Mercedes. Yeah, we know Mercedes. So evidently, I just don't know anybody, so I'm late to the party, but I'm a very enthusiastic supporter of what you do.
Well, I find that hard to believe that you are late to the party because you have all these reels and you act like you are the party. So it makes me really understand, though, that you don't necessarily focus on those little details that I consider my tile becomes like the earrings of a design. And you're thinking about the entire outfit. So
right.
I think it kind of makes sense why we didn't cross paths.
I think also, too, as my career has progressed, like I ultimately depend on the designers to pick everything out with my clients, you know, as we build homes. And so I actually can't remember the last time, well, I can. Yesterday was the last time I was in a tile shop. But before that, it's been a long time. I get called on a lot to go to those places, but ultimately I have a relationship with the design groups.
Right.
They're the ones speccing it, designing it, the architects. And so as I've gotten further in my career, I get further away. But now that's one of the real benefits of even why I started the podcast, because I'm so interested in businesses and I'm a huge fan of our industry and I want to celebrate the craftsmen and the artistry of what we do. And so now it's like, now I'm going for different reasons. And now it also, I guess, re-engages me because now I want to put your product in my home. Yes. And, you know.
Evil plans.
Evil plans. But we jumped the gun here. For those that don't know who you are and what you are, like if you're ignorant like I was up until, a couple months ago, why don't you give us just a brief intro of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, the pressure of that elevator speech. So I'm Mercedes Austin, and I founded Mercury Mosaics in 2002, which is 20 years ago. So a lot of people are like, did you start it when you were 8? And I'm like, thanks, that's amazing. And I really wanted to have a day job related to my art. And at that time, this was before social media and when it was cool to be an entrepreneur. At that time, it was a concern if you were going to start a business. Like, we're concerned about you. You should have a logical path forward.
Have you considered therapy before you do entrepreneurship?
Right. Yeah. And so I think one of the common threads of being an entrepreneur is usually when people question you or warn you, it makes you want to do it more. And so I was very all into starting this whole thing. I couldn't have articulated what it is today. It's definitely grown beyond what I had originally envisioned. But I like to summarize what we do as we're like a bakery for tile. So we're not just tile. We're so much more than tile. And we're not a manufacturer, we're not a designer, we're not an artist, but we're all of those things together, and we are just so darn detail-oriented that we also form really cherished relationships with the people that we repetitively work with. Mm-hmm. Because if you were to put us on a shelf next to other tile with no context, a lot of times people are like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, price points. If you're just leading with that, we're very different. Mm-hmm. We're definitely on the higher end. But when you take us into context of like the feeling that you're trying to curate for a space, people that are building thoughtful interiors that are wanting to really elevate their brand amongst their peers, those are the folks we're generally hanging out with. But the folks that are just like value engineering things and want to cut corners and aren't really honoring or cherishing craftsmanship, we're not usually hanging out in those circles. We definitely want to break through those barriers. But as a small, very like intentionally built boutique tile manufacturer, we like to really hang out with the people that can honor our imperfections and like want to build a valuable visual story in the spaces that they create. So yeah, set out to do that 20 years ago. I definitely try to like remain humble because I can articulate what I wanted to do now that I can look back on it and I can tell these stories. Like, I kind of feel like I'm in like grandma vibes and like looking back and like in the early days, but it's really fun to look at the progression of how we started and where we are. So that's it in a nutshell. We're in Minneapolis as the first location, and I now also have a 20,000 square foot location in Wadena, Minnesota.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so everything that we're making in Northeast Minneapolis is custom, or it's our made to order. And then everything that we're making in Wadena are the things we've taken a bet on that are in stock. And so the manufacturing process out there is creating the tile to replace the inventory that ships out. So we have this whole like ready to ship program on our website. If you need luxury tile, in an instant, we have a very select amount of SKUs available. And we kind of think about it as our seasonal, and we hope it's more than a season, but we do have to rotate it out. But it's like our blue jeans, our white t-shirts, and little black dresses of tile that are pretty basic, but people want them.
You can dress them up, dress them down. You can use it pretty much in every project. You know that you're kind of your go-to.
That's right. Yeah. Like right now, one of our hottest items is medium diamonds in the tone emerald. Like we can't keep enough in stock.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. I actually brought some chips in, which if you go to our YouTube channel for Mark D. Williams Custom Homes, you will see the Curious Builder YouTube of what we're looking at. So you can see these sweet different colors. You can also go to your website, obviously, and better yet, go in person, schedule a tour, because it's an amazing tour. But going back to your bakery comment, that's funny you said that. I didn't think about it till just now, because the drying racks, and you walked me through the kiln process and the glazing, and you have these big drying racks. And after I left, I was a little early coming home because I live in Southwest Minneapolis. So I stopped by my favorite bread company, and I usually don't stop there. My wife usually goes and gets it. And so I got my Oregon herb fresh out of the oven, and they had the drying racks. So it's so funny you said that, because that reminds me very much of your tile floor of your drying racks that you had on. That's a funny analogy.
We appreciate the restaurant industry and definitely use a lot of their tools and haven't reinvented that wheel. So they've worked really well for we're essentially baking cookies, but you don't eat our clay.
Yeah. So, before we get too much into it, it was kind of interesting. So we first met at BizCom, and Morgan Molitor, Construction to Style, introduced us, and I was at your roundtable discussion, I think an hour or two before at your studio, and I was just, we're supposed to be talking about businesses and solving each other's problems, and I was just wound up that day. For me, because normally I'm super mellow.
Yeah. That's what I
have a testimony of 1 for mellow, but your studio was so impressive, and you're like, well, we can't look at it right now. Come back again. And of course, that night was really interesting just to see the whole event be put on. But it turns out, does the name Carl Aldebert ring a bell to you? He's an architect. He works with Collage Architects now. So he's
with Collage now.
He is, but he's my next door neighbor. And
he's great.
He does a lot of my freelance architecture and design work. And so I told him. So he was the one person where as I came back from BizCom the next day, we were out shoveling snow, and I was like, "Hey, Carl." He comes across the street, and we're chatting, like out of some I don't know, crankshaft or something like that. I don't know why crankshaft, because he's a really happy guy, but I was just picturing this image of a comic book character, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I know Mercedes like right when she started, like way back when." He's like, and he brought me up to his front hall entryway. He has your tile in his foyer, and so I've walked on it many times. So did he know you I know he's been with a number of architecture firms, or how did you know Carl beforehand?
Yeah, so he was practicing on his own, and I would credit Carl to coming to me to not order what we were doing at the time, which was great. And he really helped me focus in on just being able to celebrate one color of glaze on one shape. What a concept. But to really appreciate the subtleties and the nuances of variation.
Mm-hmm.
It seems so obvious now, but at the time it was like, how many colors could I throw into this thing? And like more is more is more, which depending on the project, I will tell you more is more. But Carl kind of opened the door of like, less is more.
Mm-hmm.
And you could actually make something that is this simple, but be that like bespoke and intricate, because you guys are hand applying the colors, which is something that I have really stayed away from creating spray booths and those kinds of environments. And yes, it does make my tile cost more per square foot, but just the fact that we're brushing on the colors creates that dimension and that magic that I think machine-made tile try to get the look.
Well, and what I was impressed on when I did a tour is just the artisan quality, and meeting your people that were doing everything by hand. I mean, you have machines obviously that are helping you, but to a large degree most of it's hand.
Yeah.
And what's that machine that pushes it out? I want to say Pug, but
good memory. Pug mill.
So I was close. So as you have in the different colors of your clays, and I mean, it reminds me honestly of like Play-Doh as a kid, pushing it through. And then I took a slow-mo video that we'll post later where, where one of your technicians was cutting it off. And it's very cathartic watching it, happen. And I was like a little kid in a candy store just watching this, or I guess a bakery store. And just watching it go through that process was just really cool. And then the lady I met was taking your triangle punch out. And it was just... I don't know. It kind of brought an element of like childhood glee back to me as I'm walking through it and seeing this level of, to me, like storytelling. I think as someone who builds, try to build really high-end homes, but I really love a story, and I think people gravitate to a story. And I think it's always been part of our culture, just as humans, right? I mean, if you tell someone a story, you remember things differently than if people just give you facts.
Yes.
If you put facts within a story, it's like amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your product, what you're producing and creating has such a beautiful story that I think people would want it. Like, I want it in my home because it tells the story in some ways, and it is beautiful. This is not to take away from the craftsmanship. I'm actually more interested in the story and that I could talk about it than I am about like the actual tile itself. Me specifically, because I just like stories. And then if I could create a tile that did both, oh man, it's not even a competition.
And if it could tie in a dad joke, then game over.
Game over. Those just come. Yeah, sorry, all the moms listening. I think it's probably mostly dads, so they get what I'm putting down.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
At this point,
I work with a lot of parents and definitely a dad, so he would appreciate all your dad jokes.
We should look into that. I'll have to Google that sometime, like where that phrase came from. Like, how come you never hear about mom jokes? Why is it dad jokes?
I don't know. Yeah, and my husband is great at dad jokes as well. So,
how many children do you have?
This is my second marriage. He had his children, so he's got a son and a daughter, fully grown, and they definitely appreciate his dad jokes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you?
Most of the time. Yeah, he's been a very good balancer of me.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel like I'm more chill as a person because he doesn't take things so seriously, which is why I can appreciate you as well, as I think like I can be a pretty intense person, but this phase of my life, like I don't have time for that level of intensity all the time, which is why I can appreciate dad jokes. Like I tell people, like for my own therapy, I love watching Def Jam comedy, which is definitely not dad jokes, but it's like dad jokes, like really elevated.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, funny. How would you say, kind of just piggybacking on a little bit on the personality of yourself into your business? You had mentioned earlier on, I was looking at your website too, because you have another business. It's Mercedes Austin Art. So walk me through like how you got into clay and how you got into tile. People were telling you, hey, this entrepreneurship is a bad idea. I mean, I'm guessing you were an artist first, and then this was a passion you were able to figure out how to make your passion and artistry work on a commercial level. Is that kind of how it developed?
Yeah, it was like, again, I couldn't have articulated this in the beginning, so it sounds like really nice and polished now. But so I started first as an artist and then a mosaic artist. And the mosaics that I was making from my family's leftover home improvement project tile versus the mosaics that I was making with handmade tile.
How old were you when you were doing this?
When I was doing this, I was approximately 21.
Okay.
So I've been in this for almost 24 years, and Mercury Mosaics is 20.
I gotcha.
Mm-hmm. It's almost a quarter of a century. That's a really weird thing to say. So I was really all about these mosaics that were totally made a handmade tile. And I was like, of course, this is the thing I like the best. So I say like Mercury Mosaics was me going like, I'm going to start my own supply chain of the tile that I love the most. Like, how hard could that be?
Right. And
I think that's what is probably good for me, is I probably wouldn't start a lot of things if I really knew how hard they were. I'm like that personality where I would rather just put one foot in front of the other than have a well fleshed out plan, which I've definitely been, criticized about. I could be better in business, but like, listen, I've been going for 20 years. So am I perfect? No, but I would rather learn by doing than learn by like, it's like once you figure out an entire plan, by the time you're 6 months to a year into it, that thing's got to be reauthored anyway. So.
Right. It's funny you say that because I've been building for 18 years now. And just the other day, I ask, our employees as we have our year reviews, what's your 1 year, what's your 3 year, and certainly have goals. But like and I'm guessing this is classic, you tell me if I'm not, but I'm in such a hurry to get from point A to point B, and I've got so many ideas that I'm trying to capture that rarely do I would say that introspection is not a great strength of mine. So like to sit down and like self-analyze and like ask some of those questions to myself is something that I need to do a better job of. In fact, we're kind of this year, not radical, but we're making sure that everyone in the company is off between Christmas and New Year's. That being said, I'll probably work a ton during that time, and it'll be on these types of things like goal planning and some of that. But like what you just said, I'm much better at just, hey, here's my idea, I'm going to go with it. And ultimately, you kind of figure out on the fly. You surround yourself with good people, and you have a lot of energy. And I think that energy is very captivating and very, energizing to the people around you. It just kind of happens. And I've heard of people that like, oh, have a plan, have this really exhaustive plan. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't plan. Like, certainly we can't build a house on just energy. Yeah, deliver a bunch of 2x4s and a bunch of tile. I mean, if you don't have a plan, there's no way you're going to construct that house. But it's funny why I don't apply that more to my own business. That being said, you could plan yourself to death and never do a single thing.
Yep.
And
exactly.
I sometimes think about like working out. Like people say, well, how do you get in shape? I'm like, well, just start by walking or just start by running. I used to be a cross-country high school coach, and some of the kids had never run a mile before in their life. And they're like, well, I'm not going to make you run 5 miles on day one.
Right.
We're just going to start with, let's run from here to, the end of the trail and back. And, and let's chunk it out. I think just one, if people are listening that haven't started a business and you want to, it's really that, it's not easy. So it's not, but the concept is that easy. Just, if you believe it, just start doing it.
Right, exactly. And with Mercedes Austin Art, let's consider, like I call Mercury Mosaics my 18-year tangent to build the supply chain. And returning back to the art is just that. It was first work on pieces that are 8 inches by 8 inches. And instead of putting so much fixation on selling them, I was appreciating the privilege and the position that I was in, that I didn't have to put the pressure on my art right away to pay my rent. And so just having a little more freedom to donate them into silent auction things and getting that stuff more well known in that way. So Mercedes Austin Art is still in pre-revenue, but it also what I work on as part of my art, it really right now is becoming where I do R&D for Mercury Mosaics. It's still a goal. It's not a company that's producing revenue yet, but I did. For myself, it was very important for me to develop the brand and the website and what I want it to look and feel because I plan to have this be a very long game. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm going to make mosaic art from tile that I love so much, I want it to be set up how I would have envisioned it 20 years ago, but just never had any resources to put it together how I envisioned. So I'm putting all the effort into all the details now before I really right now I dedicate 8 hours a week to it. So it's also been a very humble reminder of how much business takes to get off the ground, because you're oh, I'm just hearing about you now. I think that happens for a lot of entrepreneurs is you've been hustling, for 5 years, 10 years, and people start noticing you once you've been at it for a while. So I think too, there's a big importance, and I think we need to emphasize the work speaks for itself versus you telling everybody about it, if that translates.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think, it'd be, I'm 42. It would be really nice to know some of these lessons when, I think I started when I was 23, something like that.
I agree with you. My gosh.
I was just I mentor some high school kids from Minnetonka High School as part of this Vantage program. In fact, I hope to bring them on the podcast or their teachers in the program. But, we invite them in and we have them do a project and you relate with these young kids. And it's amazing experience to work back and forth. But yeah. I wish they had something like that when I was in high school or college or really at any point in time, just to give that kind of that feedback. And I feel like, we'll talk a little bit later about social media and how that's maybe helped or just what that community has done for you. But I feel like on the outside of it, I think social media connects people, or it can. It can be obviously divisive too, and it can be. It's a tool like anything. Tools are. Like a gun, for instance. A gun can be a defense weapon. It can be a murder weapon. There are pros and cons. It just depends on how we use it. I've never associated social media that way, but it's somewhat applicable in the day and age we live in. But I never would have met you without a social media platform of how I connected to the people that knew you, and so I feel like it's amazing at how the community keeps getting smaller and smaller the more attention that we pay. And I think you're right that we spend so much time promoting our brand And now once you get a little bit more stable, a little bit more aged in your career, now you start looking around like, how can this community now? It's almost like you've been looking down for so long. You look up and you're like, wow, the scenery around here is beautiful. And I'm finally at that point where I'm like looking around. I'm like, there are so many. I've always appreciated the craftsmanship, but now I'm like seeking it out because I have a thirst for knowledge. I want to know what they know, and it's just really fascinating to meet people like yourself. It's inspiring, regardless of your business. I love these stories. I love hearing about, kind of this coming of age story. Now, so are you saying that Mercury Mosaics, I saw when I was in your studio, the person that was giving me the tour, I forgot, what was her first name again?
Elise.
Elisa.
Elise, yeah.
Yeah, Elise was giving me a tour, and there was 2 blocks on your work tables as you came out, and she said, oh yeah, Mercedes just did those like in the last day or so. So I think those were probably, those are 14 by 14 inch little squares. Now that's going to be wall art, or where do you envision? Because I saw on your website, you're going to sell, you're thinking like these will be large wall hangings. They'll be, walk me through some of the things that people would want, other than just the beauty of it. Is there some utilitarian value? Is it mostly like, wall art? Like, what is this going to become?
The artwork that I work on. So some of the artwork that I work on, like I've tried to differentiate some of the things. There's like varying degrees. So I there's some things that I love working on that I call the runway looks that I'm like, I don't know how to sell that yet, but I'm not going to make myself wrong that I spent 173 hours on it. It's got to be priced accordingly. I know not everyone could get that.
It's art. Yeah.
Yep. And then there's some things where I kind of treat them like a quick sketch, and it is something in a simple frame. All of my pieces are all repurposing something that was rejected in our quality control at Mercury Mosaics.
That's amazing.
And we have a situation because, like, with all the supply chain turnovers, like, our clay recipes were all changed. Our glaze recipes were all changed. So thank goodness I had this second location of 20,000 square feet so we could send really large pallets of, like, what are we going to do with this out there? And we're slowly repurposing that into art. So part of this, like, I could never make a dent in this with my art. So the purpose is to create accessible moments of our patterns where I'm not requiring you to rip up your house.
Right.
That was kind of this like comedy that I looked at. I was like, oh, no one has a way to like purchase stuff from us unless they're going to rip up their whole house or they purchased another property. But wait a second, I literally started as a mosaic artist.
Like the inverse.
Why aren't we making framed mosaics?
Right.
Well, good golly, it took 20 years to kind of figure this out, or to just
which is
return
really where
back
it started,
to the roots.
which is the fun part.
That's right. That's like the irony of it is I'm just like going back into my old playbooks and going like, what would be really like, what would I enjoy working on? Because when you're this far along in business, there's certain things that you have to work on because it's smart business health. And it doesn't mean like it's that pretty Instagram thing that you're working on. So I'm like, I need to find some things that I really enjoy working on because this is hard. It's hard to run a business right now, and especially a manufacturing business. Like, I get it. I get why places sell or close down, but I'm like, I'm not a quitter.
Right.
So
I want to
give me some mosaic art, please. Yeah.
And that's essentially balances the yin and the yang. That allows you to kind of That's kind of your peaceful moment. That's beautiful that you've been able to, even though it's not profitable yet by the sounds of it, but that it still energizes you.
Joy is a priority, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. And like a friend of mine, I'm friends with one of my competitors who's like way huger than me, Fire Clay Tile out in California. Eric, the CEO, he's like, Mercedes, you just got to handle hard better. I got a video for you to watch. So, I'm not somebody who wants to throw myself a pity party, but I hit my walls. I'm human. And some days that would be the logical thing to do is just like poor me. And so just finding and surrounding yourself with other entrepreneurs that know like the struggle is real, but also like really honoring like I am an optimist. I'm a serial optimist, but man, do I deal with some hard things, but I have to really like bet on and like really intentionally bring things to me that fill me up so that I can handle hard better, because I don't want to be like a bummer.
I think most entrepreneurs have to be an optimist. Your earlier quote was hilarious. Like, before it was encouraged, it was discouraged. Are you sure you want to do this?
Right. I'm like, well, then I really want to do it because like everyone's questioning me and I can't stop thinking about it.
There is, I don't know if it's, it is competition, and people throw out the word like type A, or there's all these different things. But I think at the end of the day, it's summarized by like drive. Like, you have a drive either to prove yourself, prove somebody wrong. You just have a desire, sometimes just the feeling of, I don't know if success is the right word, but like the feeling of accomplishment, right? Like when you complete something, you're like, it's a huge feeling of accomplishment. I know like when we build a home, like even now, 20 years later, 18 years later, to drive my kids now past a home that I built all those times ago, it is kind of neat to be like, yeah, we as a team built that. Somebody lives there. There's a family there.
Yeah.
It is really gratifying.
Pride.
Imagine when you see photos, whether it's in a magazine or social posts or however it's up, you're like, that tile would not be in that home without this history and this creation, and it's collaboration. I mean, it's your entire team, and so while we tend to be, as the owners of our companies, we might be, the face of the company. It doesn't. I mean, we know that our company does not exist with all the people around us.
1,000,000%.
I want to come back to that, but one thing I wanted to pick up on when you mentioned about fire clay is, just the last couple of years I've been more focused on, builder groups and networking, and someone had used this analogy that I really like, that you're not a bunch of silos. I mean, it's a community, it's a farm where everyone needs to interact. And I think in sharing those experiences, it removes the walls of separation that you said, this is really hard, or this is great. There's no reason why you can't apply those to your business. Is there communities like that within the clay industry or tile industry, or do you differentiate the two?
Definitely. I say that like a lot of people are my brother or sister in business, but I speak to Eric a lot. And sometimes he's funny because he's somebody who puts a high priority on working out. So I can tell sometimes when he takes a call and he's like jogging.
Yep.
Yeah. And definitely within the maker community. I haven't like dove into the clay community because, to be perfectly honest, there's several people on my team that are much more qualified experts in ceramics than me.
Mm-hmm.
So interestingly enough, I connect more with makers in general and entrepreneurs versus the ceramics community because I have such a light education in ceramics. So I didn't wait to know all the forensic science behind ceramics, as I learned as I went, and I brought people on my team with the expertise to help me focus on marketing or sales where I'm strong, and find people that could complement my strengths rather than rack my brain. So I haven't immersed I could in the ceramics community. I would love to, but I think, there's been that like hesitation of like, oh my God, are they going to find out that I don't really know what I'm doing? It's not like I've been like that, but I noticed I've like connected more with people that have a lot of different like business ventures going on, because that's like a wish and drive that I have.
Right. Interestingly enough, it's you find energy and knowledge within your own team, which is really kind of neat. So in some ways, you've answered the question by saying a lot of your, I don't want to say networking, but a lot of your knowledge base and running stuff by, I would imagine that probably brings your team very close together. I would imagine it's a very unifying thing, especially, if you as the owner and founder is coming to your team and saying, hey, what do you guys think about this? There's got to be a huge buy-in on ownership.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And I trip up and my ego gets in the way from time to time. But overall, I think I might err on the other side of like not moving forward confidently and like second guessing or questioning things more. So that's one thing I want to work on in the new year, definitely. But for sure, I think that I've created a team of owners and builders versus employees.
I like that. Yeah. Walk me through. So how many people do you have that work for you now? Now you have another whole plant or another offsite, but what's your total employee count right now?
So there are 34 of us right now. There's 4 people in Wadena, and the rest are in Northeast, sprinkled on various teams between manufacturing, design, sales, administration.
Yeah. And how is that evolution of, people onboarding? I always think it's interesting to talk to people. I think I'm really bad at scaling and growth. I've kind of always oscillated between like 2 and 5 people. And I feel like in my mind, it's like I hear, I'll listen to a podcast of a builder who has like, oh, we have framing in-house, we have trimming in-house. And, they're like 17 to 20 people. And like right now from 5 to 20 is just like mind blowing. Cause I think of course, the cost, the overhead, and it's, it's a little bit chicken and egg. Do you get the sale first and then build up your team around it? Do you build your team first and then get the sales? I know this is it's just a very interesting question for me. I'm kind of in the middle of it. How have you found your evolution of knowing when to hire people and when to let people go? How have you navigated that?
Such a loaded question. Yeah, because
I'll leave now and you can just talk for an hour and then I'll come back.
I'm just going to just like mumble to myself for an hour. So before the pandemic, we were a team of 29. And during the pandemic, I would say we started growing our team we actually reached 50 employees.
Oh my.
And had our largest year in history in 2021. And we could never have predicted what would have occurred this year until we were in it. And there was something I have to be an optimist. So in reading about corporations like Target or Wayfair and feeling like I was reading about the exact problems that I was having with inventory, too much inventory and high overhiring, but not knowing that we were overhiring because we were like really answering like how exhausted our team was getting. Like our lead times were
Are you reading my brain right now?
See, that's what I mean. I realized like how many people hit these walls. They're like, we had never had 16 to 18 week lead times. So we were hiring to manage that and get ourselves back down to normal 4 to 6 week lead times. But to have such a shift in what was being demanded of us was there was so many like layers to it. So to answer your question, I think there's part like where you can predict business based on trends. And for us, you don't just like find someone who knows how to make tile walking around on the streets. So it's not, I don't want to like undermine IT, but it's not like that. We like have to train people from scratch. So we were taking very calculated guesses in terms of our trends from a 19-year continuum. We weren't thinking of isolation of 2020, 2021. Just saying that out loud, there's probably people just like rolling their eyes at me like, how could this lady have not even thought of that? But I was really looking at like this 19-year story of how we did things.
So you went to 50.
Not like yesterday.
No,
we
I
didn't do it
understand
in
that,
like
but
one move.
but then you obviously, now you're at 33, so you let people go. How did that transition happen? So you ramped up, you had this, and everyone dealt with it. I mean, nobody had a playbook for post-pandemic, right? I mean, between shortages and then the DI, nobody could have predicted everyone staying at home, and now your tiles, I assume a huge part of it is people are doing it themselves. And so there's this massive crush of just any home improvement product. And well, anything regarding homes, if you're in your space, you're like, well, I'm at home. What am I going to do now? I might as well do this, right? Yeah. How did you then, so you scaled up, how did you scale down, or what was the reason, how did that all fall out?
That's why I deem like this has been the hardest year in business for me, because it doesn't mean I shouldn't have done this in past like 5-year pockets of Mercury. It just means it's the first time I ever had a reduction in workforce and laying people off. I've never done that before. And I don't ever want to do it again, but I also don't want to become so conservative in how I grow the business forward. That's why I didn't get a chance to talk to you yesterday, because I was like deep in conversation with one of my business mentors, because I'm like, oh my God, I realize how like I'm predicting and creating a budget and like coming up with a plan. And this is really conservative and safe, and it's not creating a lot of abundance and prosperity for people and growth. But I also noticed that I'm still super spooked on like what occurred in this year. Like I have to strike a balance. So just like looking for that balance.
Hearing you say that's actually very comforting. So this last year we hired I think I was about 6 months to a year late in hiring another project manager. And I just was responding to my team. I mean, I was maxed out. My team was way maxed out. Yeah. And but you're always thinking like, what's coming down the road? And most of the homes we build are probably maybe 4 to 6 months in design and maybe a year to 2 years in building, right? So you have some runway on and off to kind of predict some of this stuff. So anyway, we hired this individual, and then like 7 months later, you've got inflation going up, and I'm looking at the future, and I'm like, man, I think my overhead's uncomfortably high right now. I just hired this person 6 months ago. Now I feel like I need to let them go, and it was the right decision. We let them go, and but that's actually the first time I've ever let somebody go in 18 years.
Right.
I mean, so like, it does not feel. It's not an enjoyable process.
No.
And there's another. Well, Brad. Oh, Brad Levitt from AFD. He always talks about the Disney process. He's told us 100 times, and it's hire slow, fire fast. And I'm convinced I do it the other way around. When I have a need, I hire super fast, and I'm so loyal to people, and I just like people that sometimes I put up with stuff that I probably shouldn't, because I believe there's a yin and a yang. I mean, I guess you can't go through life thinking the worst of everyone either. But, I probably, the optimism in me just says like, they're going to figure it out. They're going to do it. They're going to get it. And, sometimes letting people go actually kind of, I'll have people come up to you later and they'll be like, oh, this, and another thing. You're like, really? I didn't know that. And like, oh yeah, you're doing better now. Or like, I guess understanding that if somebody leaves, your business isn't going to collapse. And bringing on somebody new, there's new ideas, there's new energy. And the training process is a little painful. I'm going through it right now with a new position that we are hiring on, and it's not enjoyable, but I can already see there's some huge advantages to it. And so it's also exciting because it's like, this is new. And so anyway.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to that like handling hard better, because sometimes when you have to make decisions for the health of the organization as a whole, it totally goes against how you started things and what you wanted to do as a very small boutique company, and it's uncomfortable. And my mentor, Glenn, yesterday just reminded me, because I told him, I was like, I removed CEO from my email signature. I only say like founder and mosaic artist. He's like, put that back on there. I said, I don't know. Like, I just don't feel like I've really been like the CEO this year, like based on what's happened. And he said, just because it's not the banner year every year doesn't mean you're any less of a CEO, but it's very important. Like anyone that has the title of CEO has had to make really tough calls. That doesn't necessarily make you the most popular person in the room, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for the health of this organization. And that's...
We talked a little bit about, so you had to let people go. You had to come back to the size you're at now. It was not comfortable, obviously, this year. So how did the team, the employees that are still there, what's their feeling? Or, I know that you depend on your team. We already talked that earlier. Just, in some ways you bring them in as kind of a ownership, if you will, in their commitment to their craft, and they're very much a part of this family, which is why it's so difficult to let people go, because they're family. Where are they at now? And I guess, what do you do to promote, you still have a lot of people. And so how do you promote kind of this collective culture where it's a very positive energy?
Yeah, I'm kind of figuring that out. So there's a small group of 6 of us that meet weekly in this meeting titled the L10 meeting. So it's our very scrappy way of implementing traction, where we don't have all the things, but we have this regular weekly meeting pulse, and we have a very visible dashboard. So the nice thing is when it's very clear where the numbers are at with everyone, it removes that emotion and how you feel about things, and you start to make objective decisions. You're not cold. But it makes things more visible, and so it makes it... So
just to pause you there for a second to dig in. So L10, what does L10 mean?
Yeah, so it's a weekly meeting based on all of the like key important things that you're working on in a business on a quarterly basis, which I think annual strategic plans are okay, but even better if you can focus down on like objectives for each quarter to get you to the end of the year with your goals. Darn it, I wish we had started at the beginning of the year, but we started this in August. And we're still consistently doing these meetings, and it's going to be absolutely vital to continue with them. And this whole like philosophy of traction is genius because we are actually making traction. So I'll kind of get back to your question, but when we started everything and when we had the reduction in our team, we needed to increase our weekly sales average by 58%. And people are like, good luck with that.
Wow.
We've achieved 39% so far.
Rock solid.
So let's go. Yeah. And Mercury Mosaics is 100% bootstrap business, and it's still owned by little old me. And so we're doing this with our own natural resources, which I question sometimes.
Yep.
But I don't have a lot of experience in that other world.
When you say that other world, are you talking about basically like
working with investors, like angel, like all of it? Oh my God, sexy on TV.
You always hear this angel investor. I'm always picturing like someone walking around with like a halo and a briefcase full of cash, and like these people aren't idiots. Like they want return on their money, and you hear stuff like 20-30%, or it's hard to know. And there are certainly I've heard of builders, and like sometimes I think if people can't explain where someone gets money from, they'll often say, oh, I think they work with an angel investor. They might not. It might just be like they're really good at business too. And so someday, anyone out there who's an angel investor and wants to invest in either Mercury Mosaics or Mark D. Williams Custom Homes or the Curious Builder podcast for this matter, we accept angels anytime.
That's right. Yeah, we love angels. Charlie's Angels. Anyway, so what was I saying? I was talking about how we had to increase our sales. I know there's a few folks out there that were like, good luck with that. Like they were going to just plan on our imminent demise. So again, that entrepreneur in me is just like, here's how I kept getting my mind straight about it. 'Cause I'm like, this is this is rough, but we're going to get through this. I kept replaying the scene from Toy Story when they were like going to go and rescue. I don't remember if it was Woody. It was like, we're going to get him. Yeah. Like, I remember washing my hands like 9 million times. I'd look in the mirror and I would just like picture this damn Toy Story scene when it was like, we're going to go. Like, there's no way this is supposed to be my 20-year in business. Like, I had all these ideas of what my life would look like. I was like, this wasn't it. And that's why my friends like, handle heart better. And I'm like, the Toy Story scene. Like, that's what got me through the damn Q2 and Q3. So getting everyone back together after reduction of force. I mean, I actually cut out our quarterly meetings because I was like, I don't know how to do a quarterly meeting when we're in this crisis. So someone's like, oh, so you're not like a performative CEO? I'm like, I guess I'm not. And I think we should focus on the work rather than like focusing on like this quarterly meeting. But at the same time, there's, over 30 of us. It would be great to have like coming together and giving updates. But I kind of wanted to get some work under our belts and be like, when you got to raise a quota by 58%, that's kind of legit. So I was like, I kind of needed to have some traction there.
Is that a sales thing or a deliverable thing? Or what? When you say you have to raise it by 58%, like what metric are you following that?
Weekly sales average.
Weekly sales average.
Weekly sales
Wow.
average.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a frame of context. Just the number sounds aggressive, so it sounds daunting. I can see why people would say that, but at the same time, you're at 38%. Which if you had said 38%, I would have said. I mean, so it's sometimes having the bar high or being forced to it. Sort of makes you, and then I'm sure you're learning a lot of things about either productivity or time.
Cash management.
I know cash flow. It's
trimming the expenses, scrubbing the budget. Yep. How can you make that thing happen by spending $1 instead of $3? Oh my gosh, we didn't know that window was wide open and the heat was, like we were losing money on shipping. Hadn't done another analysis. Like so many things, nothing left unturned.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you hire outside consultants to come in and kind of analyze business and kind of, I mean, you have your mentor obviously, but I mean, how do you get kind of like a bird's eye view? Because sometimes you're in manufacturing and some it's not one label, but let's just say from that standpoint, like how you structure different things in your room, like, time, right? Like, if they had to walk all the way across to the other side, does that make sense? When I got the tour, it was kind of neat because they're, and one fact I skipped over, which is one of my favorite things to talk about, is that your building was the former site of the development of the Nordgren bomb site, correct?
Norden bomb site.
Norden.
Yeah, and it was one of the most heavily guarded buildings in the United States by the FBI and CIA at this time. And it was all headed up by General Mills. So they had switched over the manufacturing in the building from fireproof doors to this top secret Norden bomb site operation.
Which is so cool. And the reason I bring it up now, people listening are like, dude, that guy can't keep on a single topic, which you're right. It's hard for me to stay on topic. That being said.
We all get back to it.
That being said, well, yeah, we'll close, a few doors here. No pun intended. But when I was walking through your factory, you had that internal space where Elise was saying that that's where they sprayed the bombs. And so, like, literally, I mean, it's such a cool fact. I mean, it's not really applicable to anything other than it's just my office is just an old house. I love the idea that you developed like a turning point in World War II in your building. That's pretty cool. And you should do like a line of tiles that like, goes back to World War II, like some sort of a theme or like independence, or you could almost do like a theme around it.
You could help me around that because my audience slants toward the female buyer.
They do. Yeah,
I've been just trying to figure out how to crack into the male audience. So maybe your insights can help me.
What about
camo blend?
I'm serious. Camo blend.
Didn't even think of that.
Camo blend. But see, it would be cool. You could do like a heritage program. And even within your building, that cool Lego
Brickmania, where they're taking Legos and assembling like military kits. Yeah.
Why not?
They're bossing out. Like they have a huge market in Europe. Like,
do they?
Yeah.
Us,
them, and Tattersall are the largest tenants in the building. Like Brickmania is taking over the world.
I'm gonna have to look it up. My son is certainly into the Legos, and so I want to come back there. I ran out of time because I was too busy.
They have a retail space too.
That's what she said.
Yeah,
and I really want to go see it. But going back to on brand here for your tile, I can't believe I'm the one bringing something back. It says Mr. ADHD is your tile. How cool would it be to do like a camouflage tile with Brickmania? You could actually supply all the tiles, and when they send everything off, it comes with like a little set of camo.
Yeah, and we could start small with like specific gifts to your clients. I like that. The camo or just like the heritage collection. Yeah.
I mean, there'd be, but it is fun. I mean, your colors, we were looking at these, there's just, I love how the pop of color.
Yeah.
It's really fun and vibrant. I think the shapes that you do are also very atypical from what I see, in the housing industry, everything's like rectangle, and which is great. I mean, it's still beautiful work, but you have such interesting shapes. And my a little tangent here, my sister-in-law was a ceramics major. I don't know. Do you know Justine and I? She went to St. Olaf.
We just did a mosaic for the new St. Olaf student housing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So she's going to graduate there for a while, but for a long time, she has J&I Studios, which does all my flowers. She has a little Northeast studio at her house, and she does incredible stuff. But she was trained as a ceramic artist, and so she's probably going to be mortified that I said her name on this. But anyway, she's very private, but she does beautiful work. And so when I walk through, I've seen her. She does some beautiful clay work, pottery and cups and all these things. And I wanted her to make custom one-offs for all my clients, but they ended up being a pretty big order because if I do, let's say I have 8 to 15 clients a year between remodels and new homes. My idea was to have like a set of plates, a set of cups, and like that was my closing gift to the client. And I'll have to come up with something new with you. We could do some mosaic art or something. Yeah. But anyway, just walking in there, it reminded me that I was expecting something totally different when I saw a tile. And it just reminded me of what I've seen in like artist studios. That's why I think, again, that the storytelling of what you do is so powerful and so impactful. If anything, you could raise the price on all your products by $1, and there you just solved your 58%, no problem, 180% increase.
Did everybody hear that?
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's Mark D. Williams' idea.
Be like, and they'll say, like, does he buy any of your product? You'd be like, I don't think so. But he just said double the price.
Yeah, I heard through the grapevine that you were like, I don't know I can't figure out how to work with her. Yeah. And I'm actually kind of surprised at the colors you have laying here. These are very kind of off the beat. This is not a common combination of colors, so we'll help you with that. Even I can say, like, I do feel like I'm looking a little bit at an Easter basket over here, Mark.
But do you know why I picked those?
No, I don't.
Because I was going to give them to my daughter.
I now understand.
And she loves color. I do too. But I did pick up this. She said this Garnet 92. But my favorite one when I was on the floor was this Sea Mist.
Yeah.
Which oddly enough looks a lot like your cards.
It's not odd. It literally is. And this is definitely one of the blue jeans. So let's go back to one of your 9 questions that we didn't answer. And that is like the social media and connecting. What's interesting is one client sent us a photo from their iPhone and we posted it on Pinterest, and that is still like this highly sought after feature shower wall, which is this shape and this color. And I think that was in 2016.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm like constantly on the hunt of like, what's the next here? There's a lot of pressure for that. Like I like to use the example of like John Legend. He'll, create an entire album and identify what he thinks is going to be the hit. And it's not always what he thinks. I'm like, well, John Legend can't figure out what his hits are. It's like the people tell you what your hits are.
It's true. Well, like, I was at the Grammys or the Oscars where they did, so obviously I have young kids, but Encanto, which is a great movie, but they have that song that everyone knows, We Don't Talk About Bruno. And it was like number 1 on pop chart, every single chart in the world. It was number 1 in every language possible. And they submitted a totally different song. They had no idea that song was going to be. And then it didn't win the Grammy, but that song was definitely the most popular song of the year.
Yeah.
And I guess the point is even when that's why I've actually never been a good spec home builder, because I'm not good at predicting what the people will want. I'm much better at building what they want and then making it better and better. Once you engage with them and, can extract their personality. Going into the custom nature, who is your ideal client? And, walk me through like what percentage of your clientele is direct to consumer versus like through designers and builders and I guess,
B2B versus B2C.
There you go.
Yeah. So right now, 44% of my business is B2B.
Okay.
It is because I literally, remember I told you I was throwing together a report before I was coming over here. Yeah. So my November results, 44%. I say it's generally like 50-50, but it does. Like at the beginning of the year, 35% of my business was B2B. So that serves as the answer to like what happened for us in this year. We really experienced a lag in our trade business, which produces the level of sales that we've labeled internally as our whales or our blue whales.
Oh, that's
like we try to make it fun. Like we have blue whales, we have dolphins, we have walleyes, and we have minnows, and we don't discriminate. Like we're not going to give you less service because your job is the minnow size, but we try to kind of have this like bucket of relative sizes of jobs. Our marketing attracts certain ones. We want, certain size jobs to be able to self-serve on the website. We want to be able to support the custom. So in the custom, like, are you wondering like how our process goes of like executing that work?
Yeah,
or like...
well, a little bit like, so, we use a particular River City talent show, Mike Schmillen. He's on he was on our podcast earlier. And there's obviously the major tile names. So let's say my designer. So I'm kind of curious, basically, how to steer more business towards your way, because I could sell this from a story, and I think people would be really gravitate towards it. Other than, of course, me talking about it, telling my designers to come to your studio, which is a logical next step. But walk me through the actual procurement process. So, do designers bring my clients to your studio?
The procurement.
Yes,
process.
that was very efficient. I don't know
very
if I've ever.
Corporate,
I don't know if I've ever used the word procurement before. Did I pronounce it right?
I feel like you need to follow it up with like the whoopee cushion, because it was just like so polished, just not school. Okay, so I've learned that people's definition of custom is totally different. So maybe I could tell you, like, there's two most common ways that people customize with us. So let me walk you through the simplest way.
Yeah.
So the simplest way we've been like campaigning as like blends designed by you for you, where you are in love with like a pattern that we already have, but you want to pick out the colors.
Yeah.
And so we can customize that pattern to the colors that you pick out. And that is a very popular way that we've been customizing. It's also not that overwhelming, because there's some people where if you give them any choice that they want, peace out. Like, it's just way too much. I get that. So this gives someone like a way to customize without it being like so many decisions that they have to make.
It's almost like color by numbers, or like a color chart, right? Here's
like a recipe. Like, I love this Seamus color. Yeah. I want like 90% of that, but just give me a few pops of these blues and I'm in heaven. Okay, great. We can make that up for you. It's not on our website, but we can make it for you. How many square feet do you need? So that's one way.
And now that's straight to consumer usually in that scenario?
No, both the trades and consumers are doing that. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. And then the other, I like to describe it as like creating a custom tailored suit. So your wall is the body, and we need to know like the measurements of that wall. And then we generally kind of how we walk through it is learn like, are you inspired by something else we've made, which is pretty typical. But in the case of like our custom mosaic for St. Olaf, which I'll send you a link, that architect had a vision, a very specific vision. And we have a very, very, very bespoke way of coming up with custom that I don't think any of my competitors would touch, because it's not a very smart business decision. It's definitely like an artist leading a company, which I would love to work on more of that stuff. So that's why I kind of balance it out with like the more basic things that we do, so it can allow for us to work on the magic, because I'll like never get rid of it. I can never like get it all to line up on that P&L and balance sheet ever. Because you're not going to repeat it again, but we have some pretty good inputs. But we really like that work the most. Like, of course. Because
it's the most.
Of course we do.
Right. It's also, it takes a lot of time, but it's also very, from your artistic, scratching the joy itch, right? I mean, you're really energized by it, I would imagine.
And I was just watching the Rock and Roll Hall of Fames, and like Lionel Richie is one of my favorite people, and he gave this analogy about there's created artists, where it's like then the record producer is like, oh my God, you had this hit. Okay, give me another one of that hit, and then whatever. Right. And then there's the creative artist who like here's the record producer, knows what all the best hits are, but they're still out there taking a risk and creating their art. So we're doing both. Like I'm doing, and that's what I think is the hard part, is like, because I've got that payroll, I've got all the things going, and I want to keep building this, but I also want to be the creative artisan tile company. So we're like creating both, which is why in like, my 18th and 19th year, I really got intentional of like designing a well laid out production line and going like, these production processes are very different. Like I'm going to separate out the things that we repeat over and over again from the things that
that makes sense. I mean, it seems like you're doing that with the Wadena factory to kind of hedge that. I mean, that'll kind of be, your bread and butter, if you will.
Bingo.
And then that can kind of pay for the artistry side of it, or at least stabilize, I assume, the cash flow, because you have, this can handle 80% of whatever that P&L is, and then you can enjoy the other, which oddly enough gives you probably the notoriety and the engagement and the social and all these things are really captivating that it continues to drive. But I think, I was just talking to a designer the other day, And like as a builder myself, it's like I would love to push the client's envelope sometimes. Of like as someone who's a part of the creative process, I personally myself am not drawing the plans, but obviously I have a hand in it. And like I would love to do this or I'd love to do that. And sometimes I hear designers, say that I wish my client would trust me to do this, but they want to do something that they've seen that's already been done. And not that everything has to be brand new. It's like you love it, it's your home, you're comfortable. Like okay, that makes sense, right? But as an artist, like you kind of want to keep on pushing stuff. And I think every artist struggles with this, at least the ones that I've talked to, because how do you make money? How do you run a business? And if you're always inventing something new all the time, they're not all going to be hits, obviously. And so I think what you're doing there makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, we could talk for about 3 more segments, but we're running up. I had a few follow-up questions here before we left, and one was, so you have a kind of a custom line with construction to style, right? And did I hear you guys you got some new stuff coming up that you guys are collaborating on?
Yeah, so her kitchen is the most asked for. Like when people see that, they want to then tailor it to their wall.
And that's what we call the river. Someone said that was the river. Is that really what it's called?
Yeah, and Morgan actually started by simply wanting to do white diamonds in her kitchen. So I actually had to take the time, and I wanted to take the time because she's amazing, to educate her, because people don't naturally think about tile as what I do. And so it was, and she'll say, Mercedes is so deep, but it was like an 8-month process to walk her through and get her to that. But thank goodness. So I really think these out-of-the-box tile ideas really help construction to style also build their brand. Because would you remember that kitchen if it was just some white tile that in the shape of diamonds over there?
Well, now it's iconic. I mean, you see it everywhere.
Exactly.
I mean, I saw it. Was it at the Bachelor Farmer? I think I saw it, or the in the kitchen. They had that little cafe that's closed now. But
that was before
that was
construction
before.
style.
That was
but
before.
That was popularizing how we made
that
the
geometric
diamonds.
shapes. I think that's what I'm gravitating to.
Yeah.
Just like that, and someone in the industry, I'm just like looking. I'm like, wow, that's fun. That's different. And whether I wanted it in my own home or not, like I just loved it. And it's funny because I brought it to my wife. I'm like, this would be kind of fun. She's like, yeah, that's not going to happen in our house. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll see if someone else wants it in their house.
Yeah, and shout out to the visionaries at James Dayton Design, because they are behind the Bachelor Farmer, and that project in and of itself put our diamonds pattern on the map. Yeah. So that like kind of set the tone. Morgan, shout out to her for trusting, what your designers are saying. Like she wasn't rushing her kitchen. So she trusted me to take her through the process. And given that I was like the founder and CEO and like trying to convince her on something that like she had never seen before, it wasn't like the super quick design process, because my to-do list is a little longer than the usual designer. So shout out to her for her patience. But now I understand doing my own project that your own project takes a little longer than the client timeline. So so we are envisioning another line yet to be determined. Morgan is a wild stallion. So we will see what that looks like, but we've wanted to put together a line, and I think...
Call it Wild Stallion. I mean, you got the name already figured out.
Maybe you can tee up like the sound bites for it and sing with your children. And
we'll figure it out. I can make music to it. I have a very talented Blake Thomas. He's up in Duluth. Shout out to him. He has the intro. I went to high school with him. He had a podcast for a number of years, kind of a very home companion style. And phenomenal at writing. He could write a jingle to anything. You do Wild Stallions, he'd be able to figure that out. No problem. He'd work Mercury Mosaics into it. No problem. Maybe that'll be my Christmas gift to you. I'll just go ahead and have him write it, and then you guys have to create the tile around it.
Let's do it.
That would be a good story.
Yeah.
Write the music before you have the tile. Now you guys have to match the tile to the music.
Putting sound to a product is another like genius way to differentiate it and like make your brand stand out. And that's my dream with tile, is honestly like I've put myself in a category that is full of commodities. And I think one of the most gratifying things when I started out, I was warned so many times, like, I don't know about the resale value. You got to think about the resale value. That's a lot of color. And so like, can you swear on your podcast? Like sometimes I just want to be like, see this, like, because
it's the first. We'd like to mark this as the first time we've ever heard a swear word on the the Curious Builder.
Yeah, because now we're listed regularly as an amenity on real estate listings, and every time I read that, like, I kind of want to tee up like some Dr. Dre or whatever on my reels and be like, another one where we're listed. I see like people warned us for 5 to 7 years that it's too much color, and I was just like, Ugh.
Well, I've got one for you since you seem to love challenges and being told what not to do. I don't think you can hit 100% sale quota for the week. Forget 58. You're going to slam dunk 100.
Look at this white guy is trying to tell me what I can't. No, I'm just kidding. The fact that your first name is Mark too is a trip because that's my brother's name, and so I always like when I'm talking to you, anyone named Mark is like I think of my cool older brother, but I'm a little. So.
Hey, you'd be an awesome sister. I would love to have you back on again, and now that I think I have more questions now than when we started actually, which is going to be a problem. So I'll write them down.
Yeah.
Where can our listeners find you?
You can find my company at mercurymosaics.com.
No, we're looking for your home address in case someone wants to TP it.
So
no,
if you want to actually the angel investors where they arrive. Yep. And then on Instagram at Mercury Mosaics, and my other handle is at Mercedes Austin Art. Check it all out because it's a lot of great eye candy.
That's great. Well, it'll also all be in the show notes as well. And if you want to watch this video, you can see us laughing and see these tiles. You can check us out on our YouTube channel at Mark D. Williams Custom Homes. And thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast.